We're talking about emotional eating, which is a really difficult subject, I think, for a lot of people to engage in. I think everybody sat here tonight at some point will have or has an emotional eating problem. And tonight is a conversation to talk about it. But before we do that, I'm Kieran, and this is Lianne from Beam. So Lianne is Grow's therapeutic coach. That's your title now, and that's what it's going to stick with.
Okay, I'll take it.
That's the only one you're having.
Haven't you?
I have indeed. So it'd be a lovely bit for you to introduce yourself, what you do, what you've done, what your experience is, and how this conversation's come about tonight and what we're going to do with it.
Okay, no problem. So, Lianne Weaver, I'm Managing Director of Beam Development and Training. And for about the last 12 years, I've been working as a therapist, a coach, and also a trainer. So that involves me working with people on a one-to-one basis, going and speaking at events, and also running training courses. And it's on a whole range of topics. So I've got lots of different qualifications behind me. So educational psychology, neuropsychology, lots and lots of therapeutic qualifications. And I help people. That's basically it. So whether that is someone coming to me because of anxiety, someone coming to me because of a bereavement, people generally come to me because they are fed up of feeling rotten in some way or another. So my job really is to empower people to have tools and techniques to deal with whatever challenge is in front of them. And so that is my purpose in life. That's definitely what I'm passionate about. I've written quite a few books on the subject.
Oh, you want to do that? Well. There are books available.
There are books available. You can search me on Amazon. So, books on anxiety, self-care, stress at work, all sorts of different topics. And emotional eating is something that I've kind of found myself almost a little niche in that area. So I've been working with lots of different clients, not just you, who have found food to be a challenge. Basically, if I'm helping someone who's depressed, anxious, grieving, stressed, then many of us use food as a coping mechanism. So it often comes up. In fact, it's usually one of the first questions I ask in a session is kind of, how are you eating? What kinds of things are you eating? And I think we live in a world where there's so much misinformation.
Yeah.
And we are bombarded with just sales strategies to sell us, and I'm doing this, food, which isn't actually food. And so there's pretty much a peer-reviewed research study on almost every food you can imagine that says it's really good for you or says it's really bad for you. And what happens is that much confusion, misinformation means that most of us get overwhelmed and think, bugger it, I'm just eating what I want.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that usually connects in some way to emotional eating.
So that was a really good introduction then. Within that, I think because we've already kind of gone into the emotional eating route with it. Okay, so obviously I've been to you for several years and we've talked about different points of my life around emotional eating. And everybody in here, I think at some point, maybe right now, has gone through all of the things that you've mentioned. So what is emotional eating then? Why is it that we know that we're doing it?
Yep.
We know that we're doing it. Why is it that we just don't stop?
Okay, so emotional eating, in a nutshell, is eating as a coping mechanism rather than because we are physically hungry. That's it, full stop. That's what emotional eating is. So all of us know the feeling of hunger. You know, you missed breakfast, it's kind of 2 PM, your stomach's rumbling, you're feeling quite tired, you might have a bit of brain fog, and it gradually creeps up on you and gets stronger and stronger until you're like, oh, I could eat a rancid horse, right? It gets
What?
a rancid horse.
I think more Cadbury's, but you
know?
do.
Well, this is the thing. When it's physical hunger, we get to a stage where we will eat pretty much anything to satisfy the hunger. So that's really important, actually. So physical hunger is something we naturally experience because we need food to get by, right?
Yeah, sure.
We can ignore it for a period of time. The rule of thumb is that we can actually go without food for 3 weeks. Okay, don't recommend it, but the rule of thumb is we can go for 3 weeks without food. But if we go for a period of time without food, we get hunger signs.
Okay.
So from the stomach rumbling to the feeling irritable to being tired to feeling sick to headaches, and eventually that feeling of hunger grows and grows and grows and becomes quite painful. If we don't eat, it feels physically painful. And so at that stage, we will eat anything because we're hardwired to do that. That's being wired as a normal surviving human being. Emotional eating is unfortunately something that pretty much every human being I've ever met has succumbed to at some point or another. So I have never met a human being, myself included, that hasn't in some way abused food. Whether that is we go all day without eating because we think we're too busy, to scoffing a massive bar of chocolate and then feeling sick, to having an extra large takeaway and having to kind of almost lay down because we feel so awful on it.
Yeah.
Familiar, right? We've all experienced that. And so that is emotional eating. So emotional eating is not really about the physical hunger. In fact, most of the time when we emotionally eat, if we really paid attention, most of the time we're not physically hungry. But
See, because that's fascinating, isn't it? Because, we eat for the sake of it.
yeah.
Because what are we trying to get from that? So we're in that moment and we're not hungry. We may have just had a lovely, lovely meal that is, prepared well and all of the things that we should be eating.
Yeah.
And then we're like, I'll have a little bit of this. And then, what happens there? Where do you sort of feel that comes from?
So every one of us has an emotional connection to food. The first food that we have is our mother's milk or milk from our mother. And that has a really important bonding purpose. It's not just nutritional. It's about us bonding with our caregiver. And so
It's my mother's fault.
it's your mum. It's always...
Mum,
yeah.
where are you? You're in your
Yeah.
somewhere. It's your fault.
I mean, as a therapist, it's always the parents' fault. So we instantly have this kind of connection of associating food with being safe, loved, bonded, if we've been lucky enough to have an upbringing that has provided that.
Yeah.
Then, as we get, through our childhood, we will perhaps be given chocolate as a treat. Or you go to Granny's house and she makes a Victoria sponge. Or,
Oh, yeah.
you're taken out on your birthday and you have a pizza. Or
You had to bring pizza up, didn't you?
I know I had to.
You had to bring pizza.
It's
It'd be
important.
Starbucks next.
It's important. Oh, don't go there. So we start to associate foods with emotions.
Okay.
And most of us, when we get into emotional eating, what we're really doing is saying, I'm feeling a really big emotion. I don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with it. So I'm going to use food as a way of distracting or maybe even filling the gap. So we can eat when we're sad. We can eat when we're lonely. We can eat when we're bored. We can eat when we're angry. We can eat when we're happy. It's not just a negative emotion, but it's strong, intense emotions that throughout our life, we've had a connection to food associated with it. So if you fell over and hurt yourself and your granny gave you some sweets, any time that you felt hurt, and that could be physically or emotionally, you might go for sweets. If whenever you were poorly, your mother made you mashed potato and sausage and gravy in a big stodgy meal, whenever you feel a bit low and not yourself, you want that big stodgy meal. So we have a really strong associative connection between food and the emotions it gives. Many of us, and I'm sure people in this room will recognise that we use food as a way of showing love. It's something that is really powerful. If your family are coming over and you bake them a cake specially, it's an act of love.
How many of you do it? How many of you do it?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, go on, sorry.
Because
Because I'm like,
it
there's
is.
so much like, pull a bit.
So because we have that strong connection, when we then have difficult emotions to deal with, we then start to use food as a mechanism. So the primary reason we're an emotional eater is because we've used it as a coping mechanism. We then also create habits.
So that's the habitual response.
Habitual response. So I've just finished my meal. Now I want something sweet.
8 o'clock every night.
8 o'clock, I need a glass of wine or a bar of chocolate, or I'm driving home from being weighed and I've done really well, so I'm going to stop at the garage and get a bar of chocolate. A reward, a treat, that kind of, I'm really against that sort of language as well in terms of food. We've talked about that before.
I'm sure that will come up later
I'm
on.
sure it will. So it's very much using food as the emotional crutch and then having these associative triggers. Our brain loves patterns. And I think something that's, as you know, deal with a lot of neuroscience and neuropsychology, so I won't go massively into it.
Oh, do it, because it's geeky and I love it.
But basically, your brain has one job, which is to keep you alive at the end of the day. Doesn't care if you're happy, doesn't care if you're sad, doesn't care if you're fat, doesn't care if you're skinny, has no care about that. It cares that you're alive at the end of the day. And the best way for your brain to predict you being alive at the end of today is by doing what you did yesterday because it worked yesterday. So you may have the best intention of, I am going to eat really healthy today, but we start to have these strong urges to do what we've always done because the brain wants predictability. Add to that then, you've had a hard day at work, you've had an argument with a loved one, you're feeling upset, you're feeling lonely.
God, that was like yesterday.
Bang. Straight back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but that happens so quickly though, doesn't it? That we don't just repeat good behaviours, do we? Things creep straight back in, and I think it's some of the questions we'll ask later on. But like, you can be doing so well in this really good pattern, and then it takes one thing to take you off.
Yes, again, a bit of neuroscience. So when we go for the quick fix, we get a dopamine hit. And dopamine is a really addictive neurochemical that we produce. So dopamine is what social media is built on, right? So when they first came up with the model for Facebook, they brought in likes and friends in that term because it felt nice that someone liked what I'd posted. It was nice to have a friend, gave us a dopamine hit. Problem with dopamine is it's highly addictive.
Yeah.
So we want more, we want more, we want more. Food
It's
gives us a
hit, isn't it?
dopamine hit.
Because when you were talking about the eating when you're happy, eating when you're sad, and I think anybody that's ever sat in a group with me over the last 5 years will know that pizza takeaways, for me, is a huge emotional crutch. And obviously, like, pizza is particularly... I set my own trap on that one, didn't I?
I didn't do anything.
But no, I know. You just did it. You just have this ability. But like, pizza was always about my dad.
Yeah.
Like, happy, really, like because it wasn't a food that we would ever be able to afford as a family.
Yeah.
When we would have it, it would be such a special occasion. And it was always like nice, safe, happy memories. So when I was eating pizza then, potentially there's something, would you say that there was something in a drift that was making me order it to give me the dopamine hit?
Yes, it can be that you were dealing with a difficult emotion or just wanted that feeling of love and security and family. It might not have been you were necessarily upset, but it's just like such a lovely feeling. But it also could have just become habitual. So it was a treat when you were growing up. You didn't have the financial means to have that often. You're now kind of in a position where you could have pizza every night. So it's like, oh, that feels good.
So, okay. So actually, yes, part of it, the first time I did it as now was like linked a bit. Dad, so let's say when Dad died, ordered a takeaway, it made me feel good in that moment. But because the days were quite low after it, by ordering more of it, I was getting more of a lift. Is that what you mean?
No.
That's it, shoot me down.
What you were likely doing in that circumstance, and I'm really reluctant to generalise this because we're all individual and we all have our own experiences, but I know your story. We've explored it. So in that circumstance, what you were doing was trying to self-medicate with food. So you felt like shit, you were sad, you agree. Can I say shit?
You've said it. To be fair...
Sorry.
To be fair, they're used to me.
Sorry, everyone. So you felt rubbish.
Oh, shit, sounds so much better.
In our therapy sessions, we're super sweary, aren't we?
How very dare you?
So-
Yes.
Okay. So you felt rubbish.
Yeah.
Understandably, grief is, as I'm sure most people in this room know, is an inescapable, all-consuming emotion.
Yeah.
And so frequently we self-medicate when we're grieving because it is not an emotion that we're not comfortable, but we experience anger, we experience sadness, we experience
Is
stress.
that like the 7 signs of grief kind of thing? You're going to shoot me down again now anyway. Shut up now. I can sit over here.
I mean, the 7 stages of grief
Aye, that one.
are an aspect of it, but grief is like its own beast.
Okay.
In terms of emotion. So if you came to me because you were feeling anxious, there's almost like a formula for dealing with that, right?
Yeah.
When you come to me because you're grieving, your grief over your dad is, as you know, I've lost my dad in a similar way, is different to my grief over my dad. So I can't even sit here and go, I know exactly how you feel, even though we've both lost our dads that were really important to us. Hey, don't make me cry.
Oh, did I? Did we nearly do
No.
it then? Oh.
But what both of us are doing is, even though when we're grieving, the people around us are grieving as well.
Yeah.
But we're all grieving an almost a different person, right? So our grief becomes incredibly private and personal, and it's uncomfortable. It's difficult. It feels never ending. It feels relentless. And as you catch your breath, it's like back down again. So turning to what in therapy we would call anesthetic and distraction techniques is a really common thing for us to do when we're grieving. So to clarify both of them. So an anesthetic technique is anything we use to change our emotional state. So food, alcohol, smoking, snacks.
Sex?
Sex.
I thought you said snacks. You had me on snacks.
Snacks and sex.
Easily could go either way on that. Could easily go either way on that. Sorry, Cullen.
Maltesers, Cullen. Yeah.
Balls. I'm not telling you whether they've got chocolate or honeycomb centre.
Cullen.
He's dying over there.
Oh, love him.
Love you.
So, and see, I've always got to bring it back really sensible because he'll just take
course.
me. So an anaesthetic technique is where we feel so rubbish, and this isn't just in grief, this is when we're dealing with any difficult emotion. It can be stress at work, it can be a difficult relationship, it can be anything. It feels so rubbish, we want to change our emotional state as quickly as we can. So we turn to alcohol, food, drugs, sex, anything that will quickly basically change our neurochemicals, right? The problem with an anesthetic technique is it just gives a mask, right? So in that moment of eating the chocolate cake, you might not, can I swear?
Go for it.
All right. You might not give a shit, right? So you're eating the chocolate cake and it feels really good. What happens when you finished it?
You feel shit.
You feel worse, right?
Yeah.
You feel awful. So now I'm not only dealing with grief or stress, I now also feel in shame and feel bad about myself and all of that stuff. A distraction technique is another way we deal with discomfort, but they're a little bit more grey. So an anaesthetic technique is always harmful. A distraction technique is a little bit more grey. So a distraction can be really good. So you're feeling rubbish, you've had a bad day, you decide to go for an hour run. You decide to clean the house, you decide to take the dog for a walk. Great. However, a distraction technique becomes harmful when it goes from distraction to avoidance. So I've worked with a client that started off using going for a run, and then he was avoiding his problem so much that he was going for 6 runs a day.
Oh, okay.
That's when it's harmful.
Not me.
No.
Not me.
Cleaning the house, absolutely fine. But if all of a sudden you're obsessively cleaning the house to avoid stuff, not good. Throwing yourself into work when you've got a home problem, great distraction. Unless you're staying in work 14, 16 hours.
And do you know what? In saying that, a lot of people wouldn't realise this. Some of you will. But I did the avoidance thing when Dad died.
Yep.
So he died at 10 to 5 in the morning, and I turned up in here at 6:30 in the morning to work all day.
Yep.
And carried on working as if nothing, not obviously, then now,
Yeah.
not to deal with it.
Yeah. Because it's just too big. It's
Yeah.
too scary. And that's where food often comes in, right? So we most commonly will do it with alcohol or food, or both, right? But alcohol, not for this meeting really, but alcohol is something that we can recognise we're using it dysfunctionally, and we can abstain from it.
Because we don't need it to stay alive.
Exactly.
And because we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? I know we're kind of slightly away from emotional eating in a sense, but I think it's an important
It's really
part.
connected, yeah.
There's addiction, right?
Yep.
Food is an addiction.
Yep.
And whether that's recognised publicly enough, I don't think it is. I know we've talked about before, and I'm fully aware that there's people in the room that may fit into other camps of this, and so this is not to be difficult. But when you don't need to drink to stay alive, you don't need to take certain drugs to stay alive. Obviously, if they're prescription drugs, slightly different. Recreational drugs then. You don't need those to stay alive, do you?
Yep.
You can wean from them.
Yep.
But then food is this massive thing that we are thousands and hundreds of choices in a day.
Yep.
And then it added into this mix of dysfunctional
Yep.
and all of that other stuff. So where does this kind of sort of sit within emotional eating for you? Like if somebody comes in and is in that, like how do we start to look at that problem?
Yeah.
Is it like, do people walk in sometimes and they don't realise they're emotional eaters?
Yes, most of the time, I would say. I think everyone realises maybe that they don't have the best eating habits or they're not eating the right things. And I think if we look at the sort of global message, the NHS message, it's much more about, eat your 5 a day and all of that stuff. I think most of us know what we should and shouldn't be eating. I don't think many of us need a lot of re-education on that.
Yeah.
We're aware, eating your fruit and your veg is a really good thing to do. However, what most of us aren't aware of is how much we're using food as that coping mechanism, as that crutch. And we berate ourselves and feel ashamed of it. So we think it's because we've got rubbish willpower. We think it's because we're not, that person who lost all the weight and has huge control. Well, I'm not as controlled. And then there's a lot of self-judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, really. One of the things with emotional eating is it's often done in secret or isolation because of that fear of judgment from other people.
And I did this, in terms of the shame and guilt thing, I was an overweight weight loss coach.
No.
You proud that I changed the words?
Yeah, really.
And that was hard. That was it was easy to talk, and sorry guys, you listened to this for the last 2 years, but it was easy to stand up there every week and go, it's this is my problem, what's that, and this is happening this week. It was exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
You're good.
Oh, flip.
You're good.
And nobody quite gets that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, like, how many of you have been slimmer before? Like, when you put weight back on, that is this huge self-frustration, anger, shame. And then to be stood up leading this is a challenge. And so how does somebody, like, in that, start to change that, to be a bit nicer to themselves? Because everyone says be kind, but, like, when you're in that moment, those moments, it's quite difficult to do, isn't it?
Really difficult. And I think it becomes a vicious circle, right? So you feel anger, shame, embarrassment, judgment, mostly from yourself rather than other people, which we've worked through. And then because you feel rubbish about yourself, you want to feel better. So we go to the food to try and feel better. And then, oh my goodness, I put on weight. So it's like this vicious cycle that feels almost impossible to leave. And people can spend their entire life doing that without recognising the patterns as such or knowing how to deal with the patterns. Part of my issue with most slimming groups...
Thank you very much.
But most slimming groups is if we're perfectly honest, they're brilliant business models, right? They have a strategy to help you lose weight. If you've got a wedding in 6 months and you need to lose 4 stone, there's a strategy that will help you do that. Does it deal with the mindset? Does it deal with the emotion? No, it absolutely doesn't, because if you lose the weight and you keep it off, they've lost a customer. So then it's just a really nice business model in helping you lose the weight. So you're like, okay, that works. Now I've had the wedding or whatever it is, go back to that emotional eating, those negative behaviors, put on the weight again, blame myself, self-judgment, shame, all of that stuff. So I put on more weight than I probably lost in the beginning. I'll go back to that slimming club because that then worked before. So we stay in that loop. And I'm sure there are people in this room that have been in that loop, that often we will get fixated on, I am like this and it's not my fault. So I'm like this because my parents didn't teach me better. I'm like this because I had a bad partner. I'm like this because that horrible thing happened.
I've used that one.
I know. So we have that mindset, and it might be entirely true, but it's not helpful. So if I stay going, well, I'm like this because this bad thing happened to me, I will forever, even if it's 60 years later, be a victim to the bad thing that happened to me. If, however, I can go, do you know what? I've learnt these bad behaviours, or I've developed this as a coping mechanism because that thing happened to me that's not my fault. But now it's my responsibility to do better, to learn different tools, to break the habit. And then we're empowered. All of a sudden, I'm not the victim. It's like, that happened to me and I can move forward. So it's not saying that the thing that happened that caused the coping mechanism wasn't bad, but it's saying I'm not going to let that control my life anymore.
Do you feel that some people are resilient to the change? Or they resist, not resilient, they resist that change, though. They kind of like wallowing in that. Because it's to move out of that, this happened to me. Mm-hmm. So it's that person's fault. And you can have lots of solutions for them.
Yep.
But it's actually, they've created this safe space of being able to blame everyone else.
Yeah. Well, we get comfortable in our discomfort. If we go back to what I said about the brain doesn't care if you're miserable, doesn't care that you might cry every day or you might be overweight. It doesn't care about that. It says that I have thought like this before, I've behaved like this before, and ultimately I was alive at the end of the day. So let's just keep doing that. So I wouldn't see it as wallowing, because that's a bit judgmental. But it's how the brain is wired. So it takes a lot of resilience. It takes a lot of courage to go, I don't want to do this anymore. What I would say is, and I say this to people who come into my therapy room, I can only help you when you're ready to be helped.
Yeah.
And that's part of your role as well. We can share tools, we can give information, and it's important to recognise that in our friends and family as well. It's awful when you see someone struggling, but if that person isn't ready to be helped, you cannot drag them out of it. So we have to at least have that realisation of taking responsibility and saying, enough's enough. Now if they come to you, me, their mate for help, they can be helped. But until we get to that stage, all of us are the same. It doesn't really matter if we're shown, the kind of golden pathway to success. It doesn't matter if we're not ready to take the step ourselves.
It's quite powerful, though, isn't it? Because obviously we see, and I see this all the time, we see people walk in and they're at the point of being desperate for change. This is like their last resort. They're very fragile. Mm-hmm. What we want to do as a company is help them become happier, healthier, fit and slimmer. Yeah. Whatever that looks like to them, whatever that means to them. And everyone is individual and everyone is driven by different things. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's hard because they want it, but they're not ready to be responsible then, I think. Is that what?
Take responsibility. Yeah.
And
there's loads of reasons for that as well. So that isn't because you don't have willpower. So let's just address willpower.
Well, yeah, because this is my favourite thing. See, and I don't know whether we're going to have a different viewpoint on this.
Okay.
I'll let you say your bit.
All right.
then I
would
do
just
my
say
bit.
mine's backed in science.
Yours is backed in science. Never know what I've read online. Because it's a huge thing,
So-
though. Like, everybody in here goes, right, I just haven't got the willpower.
Yeah.
And I believe, oh, God, I said it, you go first, go.
You sure?
Yeah, go on, go for
Okay.
it.
Bullshit.
Absolutely. So, yeah, because it doesn't exist, does it?
No, willpower exists, but sorry.
No,
I was
but-
half with you and then I'm not.
We're only halfway there.
Only halfway.
Yeah, but like I think you make choices which become stronger over willpower.
Okay, so let's go to the...
I should have just shut up.
Let's just go to the science. So, willpower absolutely exists. It is a thing that we all have, but my willpower isn't necessarily stronger than yours or theirs or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't something you have or you don't have. Your willpower is like an exhaustive muscle that we have. So the way I describe willpower is like this. Every morning, if you've had a good sleep, if you feel well, and they're really important factors, when you wake up, imagine that you're in a computer game and you have like energy bars. Your energy bar of willpower will be full, right? If you're well and if you've slept well. So you've got that full green tank of willpower. But sometimes it takes willpower to not keep hitting snooze.
Yeah.
So we lose a bar. Sometimes it takes willpower to get in the shower. If you're like me and you like a cold shower, sometimes it takes, every time, it takes willpower to have a cold shower.
You're just odd.
I am odd.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes willpower to get in the car and go to work. Sometimes it takes willpower not to go through the red traffic light. So before we've even got to work, our willpower may have defeated, right? Then at the same time, we've decided that today is the day that I'm going to eat healthy, right? So it's 11 o'clock and someone says to you, do you want a chocolate biscuit with your cup of tea? Nope, I'm not going to have it. I'm eating healthy today. Little bar of willpower goes down.
Anyone do that this morning? Resist it?
So then we go through our day. It takes willpower not to call your manager an idiot. It takes willpower not to push into a queue at the front of a shop. It takes willpower not to scream at your kids when you pick them up from school. So we get to tea time. And then you think, okay, I'm going to eat a healthy salad, but I know there's a chocolate bar in that cupboard. I'm not going to have it. And then you have an argument with your partner, or you're getting the kids ready for school tomorrow and getting all the lunch boxes, and your willpower is now flashing on red. And you think, sod it, I'm going to have that chocolate bar. That is not a flaw in an individual. That is a flaw in the human makeup. Now, I'm really careful here. I'm not telling you these things to give you an excuse. I'm telling you these things to give you information that empowers you so you don't keep thinking it's a me problem.
Yeah.
It's a human being problem, right? So the way that we have been told to make any change in our behavior is basically get stronger willpower. It's bollocks. Because our
We went from shit to bollocks. Didn't take long, did it?
Sorry. It's rubbish.
Yeah, and that's what I agree with. That's what I agree with, yeah.
Willpower will also fluctuate if we're not feeling well. Willpower fluctuates if we're depressed, if we're anxious, if we're worried about a family member, if we're grieving. So we might not even start the day with a full bar of willpower. So we might start with half if we're lucky. And then just normal life, everything in normal life takes willpower. There are people in this room right now using their willpower not to cough because they're terrified of you.
Or to stay awake because they're confused.
Yes, maybe.
Me. I know I'm all right.
Good. Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay. Because I definitely think that is the thing, though. We're told that you can have stronger willpower. Willpower is not it. So how does that become stronger then? How do we develop that? Because obviously we've got people, many sat with us today. Hello, everyone. It's nice to look out to give my neck a bit of a stretch. That's what happens. There's people here today that have lost, and changed their lives. So, so how have they done how has their willpower shifted to that? From someone that wasn't strong in willpower to that it is now stronger.
Yeah, because it's like a muscle. So the more you use it, the stronger your willpower will be. So the more you kind of set yourself challenges, and what I would do working with clients is we start with micro challenges, right? So it's not, I've been eating really unhealthy for 30 years and now I'm just going to eat salad. It's just not going to happen. It isn't going to work. But actually it could be, do you know what? I am just going to stop eating crisps. Whatever it is, you start with something that isn't your go-to thing. You start with something slightly small.
Don't say it. I know what you want to say.
Starbucks. That takes more willpower.
Yes.
Yes. So you grow your willpower just like you do any other muscle.
Hey, that's good brand, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Grow your willpower.
There we go.
Sorry. $2025 campaign. Thanks very much.
That's a pleasure. Just give me commission.
Yeah, 0.
Standard.
So somebody then that has come in, so obviously we've got a lovely plan, and we've got, which is obviously taking in all that NHS advice that you mentioned earlier on, and so someone that's picked that up has obviously then really worked that over the weeks and months. It's not just a 1 day fix, 1 week fix, and I'm fixed.
No. And it's not that, some people are better at it than others. Some people have trained, inadvertently, they might not have known, but some people have trained their willpower more than others. So we also are highly motivated by our why. Why am I losing weight, right? So amazingly, what's fascinating about human beings is you would think our biggest motivator would be to save my life, right? But that just isn't the case. And what I always find really interesting is we all know people that are perhaps being told to lose weight, stop smoking, stop drinking, or the doctor says you're going to die, and they can't do it. However, anyone I've ever asked this question, if a doctor could say to you, if you don't stop doing this, your loved one could die, everyone's like, I'd do it like that. Ooh. So sometimes our why is not big enough and emotive enough for us to be successful.
And I feel like, and this links beautifully back to the holiday thing, doesn't it? And the losing weight or trying to become healthier or slimmer just for short-term goal.
Yeah.
It's quick, short focus, let's do it, crack on. But actually, what is the bigger picture of this? Because, like, obviously, I am getting married in 11 weeks, and that wasn't a funny thing. I was serious as a commitment.
They were shocked.
He's so lucky. That's not for me. Like, that's the tip of where I am. And I've talked about that this week. That actually for me is one of the biggest whys this year was that I wasn't happy.
Yeah. And we had a big realisation, didn't we?
Yes, lots of tears, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think that was not with the company or with my love life or with my family life. I just wasn't who I am. And that took a lot, didn't it, in that session to get into like what drives it. And coming out from that, it was for me setting smaller, more achievable goals to believe that I could.
Yeah.
That it's not my fault.
Yeah.
And this is how I think.
Yeah.
But for somebody that isn't there yet, where would they sort of start?
I think the first thing is to recognise where your responsibility is.
Okay.
So what can I control in this? So many of us try and cause ourselves a lot of stress and a lot of problems by trying to control the uncontrollable. So we try and control all of the outside stuff. And many people in this room will be just prolific self-sacrificers for the benefit of other people. They will neglect their own needs, their own wants, their own desires because they care for so many other people.
Anyone do that? Yeah.
Lots.
And none of you can be seen on camera, so those of you putting your hands up, please don't panic. You know, your loved one's not going to go, can you believe they said that?
And so one of the first things is to recognise that the only thing I can ever control is me.
Pause.
That's a bit annoying. Oh, it stopped. Okay.
Me?
Yeah.
I like when we go, ha ha ha, poker face back in.
It's my professional bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the only thing we can ever really control is ourselves, right? So
Yeah,
that's it. I can control my thoughts, my behaviors, my actions. I can control what goals I set myself. I can control how I show up. That's it. I can't control anything else. So then the next layer, so if you imagine that's a circle,
Yeah.
that's what I can control, right? So I'm stood in the middle of the circle and then they've got that circle of control around me.
Like we control this room.
Yeah. We don't.
No, I don't.
What we're doing right now is influencing, right? So that's the next circle outside of the circle of control. So what can I influence? Well, we can influence the people in this room. You know, we can say, everyone stand up. No, don't.
All right.
That was control.
I would have done it.
I know you would have.
You wanted to do it earlier, I want to stand on one leg.
Just seeing. So we can influence everyone in this room, but we don't have control of these people. If they all wanted to cough right now, they can cough, right? They have free will.
Don't.
We can influence it. We can't control it.
Yeah.
So we can influence the people around us, our environment, our work, but we don't control those things.
Yeah.
And then if you imagine a third circle on the outside of it, that's our concerns. So concerns are things like someone else's health, global issues, what's going to happen in the general election, those sorts of things, right? So many of us who have kind of sacrificed our own needs have focused from the outside in. We've tried to control the uncontrollable and we serve everyone else, and then there's very little left for us at the end of the day. What I would encourage people to do to start is to flip that and work from the inside out. So work on, okay, what can I do for myself today? What could I do today that will make me feel slightly better? Just one thing. And as I'm saying that, I hope everyone's kind of thinking of that one thing. So we've still got enough time in the day to do one thing that'll make you feel slightly better. Starting that way starts to change our mindset of recognizing I'm responsible for me. Makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because of course, which when you said that we start to become responsible again, then, don't we?
Yeah.
I think for me, that's what was difficult. And I don't think anybody in the room today thought that emotional eating involves all of this. Did any of you think this? No. Did you just think you just liked chocolate and that was a problem and you just needed to be fixed on chocolate, when actually it's not our fault?
Yes. But it is your responsibility. Yeah. And also, if I can come back to the word you just said, fixed. So often in therapy, but we think it ourselves as well, we think we need fixing. We think we're broken. There's something wrong with us that needs outside intervention. Occasionally, we do need outside intervention. So whether that's a doctor, a therapist, whatever, physiotherapist, whatever. But most of the time, we are not fixed. We don't need fixing. We are not broken. We don't need someone else to come and make it better for ourselves. And again, this comes back to the responsibility bit. So because you have an emotional eating issue and you're eating too much chocolate, it's not that needs fixing. It's that you need to address that as a coping mechanism and work out a better way of doing it. Because right now, that's not serving you. It's not helping you. So it's not fixing it.
Okay. So now, like we've talked in the past around comfort. And this is my one of, I think
this was a light bulb moment.
This was huge for me.
Yeah.
So I love pizza. And as we said earlier, it was like quite connection to Dad, but then became a habitual response. But I couldn't stop ordering it. And it was like crack cocaine. Do you know what I mean? Like I just couldn't stop. It was just something that if I felt shit, that's what I would order.
Yeah.
And I would do it without people knowing as well. And I'm a nightmare secret eater. But you said to me once, like, is it a comfort food and is it a discomfort food? And I found that really profound because I'd never thought about, in the moment I ate it, it was like, it felt super comforting, all that cheese on the top that was melting and golden, the garlic and herb dip that I dipped it in, the chicken strippers that it came with a nice barbecue dip, the 4 cookies to finish on something sweet. Felt hugely rewarding and hugely comforting. And then you said to me in one of the sessions, I think it was at the start of 2023, and you said, but how did you feel directly after? And it was like, it's a discomfort food. Could you like explain a bit more about that? Because I don't think I get like that across to people well enough.
I think the first thing we've all got to accept is our tongue lies to us, right? So our tongue tells us that something is delicious, and that's what is loudest, right? So we have these emotional associations. So we want to feel loved, safe, happier, whatever it is. And then our tongue tells us that that food is delicious. We've done exercises where you now know that's not true, right? Yeah. We've kind of mindfully eaten. What I always encourage, the secret, by the way, if you just want to kind of get the secret to not eating emotionally and kind of go home, don't please. But if you do, the secret to not eating emotionally is eating mindfully. That's it. That is the one tool you need. If you took nothing else away from this session, learn to eat mindfully and you will overcome emotional eating.
So what is mindful eating? Because like it gets banded around as it be more mindful, mindfulness, eat more mindfully.
Yeah.
What is it? In its nutshell, what is eating more mindfully?
It's being present with the food that you're consuming. Okay, in a nutshell, that's what it is. So if we come back to this concept of comfort and discomfort food, if I am eating absently, so I am not present with what I'm eating, my tongue will tell me that the pizza is delicious, and then I'll just eat it and scoff it, and I'll be feeling those emotions, and then quite soon after, our body generally doesn't feel great. So we talked about it affected your ability to sleep, you feel bloated, you feel sluggish, don't feel great the next day, heartburn, and also emotionally we don't feel great. So it never gives us what we're seeking emotionally in the long term. So we feel that shame, the judgment, all of that stuff. So that's eating absent-mindedly. Eating mindfully is going, okay, how does this really make me feel? So there's 10 steps. And by the way, on my website, and if you scan the QR code on the back of your little postcards, there's links to emotional eating tools. And there's all different ones, but there's a 10-step process to eating mindfully. So you can literally print it off, stick it on your fridge, and then learn how to do it, how to do that process. So eating mindfully begins with actually asking yourself, am I physically hungry, or is this a coping mechanism?
Oh, okay.
So we start with that. A lot of the time, you will not be physically hungry. So recognizing what is physical hunger. What does that mean? Well, physical hunger, as I've said, will build up slowly. And generally, if you're genuinely hungry, you don't care if it's a pizza or an apple, you want food, right? Emotional hunger comes on quite fast.
Yeah.
Regularly has a craving attached to it because we're seeking that emotional connection. So, am I really hungry? If I am really hungry, then it's, okay, let's start off with a little bit of something. So let's say you have still decided, I still want some pizza, right?
I thought you were going to say Starbucks then.
No, we're not. So you decide that you want pizza, right?
Lovely. Great. I'm in for this. Go.
So you start with a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
So then what most of us do is we eat absent-mindedly. So we eat when the TV's on.
Right, okay. Mobile phone,
we
scrolling.
Yeah. So what we want to do is kind of eat like our grandparents did, which ideally is sat at the table. We eat 30% less when we eat at a table than when we eat on our laps. Just that alone.
Because like I am totally guilty of TV's on, sit down, and just eat. Yeah. I don't even know what I've eaten half of it.
Yeah.
And to the point that I'm bursting at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you're kind of dipping your hand in a crisp bag and you're like, oh, they've gone. And you didn't even notice. Yeah?
Yes.
Total mindless eating. So you start with something small and then you eliminate your distractions. So you decide to be present with whatever that food is. So I'm not telling you that it has to be something that's traditionally healthy, whatever that food is. What I want you to do before you even go to put that food to your mouth is to pause and breathe. So, as you know, I deal a lot with the breath. I use the breath a lot. So our breath is our primary indicator that tells the brain whether we feel safe or whether we feel threatened. And essentially, it puts us into what's known as the autonomic nervous system, which can either be the sympathetic nervous system. Stay with me.
There's so many systems and so many things.
So the sympathetic nervous system is where our fight or flight response lives, right? So it's our stress response. Or the parasympathetic nervous system, which is known as our rest and digest response, right? And we should healthily oscillate between the two throughout the day. So sometimes we're in stress mode, we need that to cross a road, we need that to meet a deadline. And sometimes we're in rest and digest, which ideally should be when we're sat and calm and present.
So that's making me think then, so people who are not doing that, like if they're eating in work and they've got a busy job, so they're not eating in the rest and digest, they're in that stressy. So what's happening then when they're eating then?
So when we are in stress response, we produce stress hormones, particularly cortisol. And what happens is what your brain believes in that situation, even if it's just, I'm a bit busy at work, what your brain believes is you're in a life or death situation. Even if consciously you know it's not, our brains are sat there in the dark and it thinks I'm in a life or death situation if my stress levels are increasing. And so the first thing that happens when I start to get stressed is it downregulates, so it decreases the importance of digestion. The first thing that stops working effectively is your digestion. So if you were running for your life, it doesn't really matter if you've got a bit of heartburn, right?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not an essential life-saving function in that moment. Great if you're running for your life. But if I'm constantly stressed because of work, home, relationships, whatever, my brain still believes it's life-threatening. So my brain's still producing a lot of cortisol, and my brain is still downregulating the importance of digesting food. The other thing that's really interesting is if we're in fight or flight, what eventually happens is we particularly start to put fat around the middle of our body. And we put fat around the middle of our body because if we go back to ancestral times, when we started to perhaps face a difficult winter, feel stressed, we put fat around the body to not only protect our organs from kind of malnutrition, but also to physically protect our organs if we were attacked. So basically, if I've got more fat around the middle...
I'm really well protected.
My essential organs are protected by that layer of fat. So you had a better chance of survival. Okay? We don't need that now, but our body and brain still works in the same way. So if I am eating when I'm stood up, when I'm on the go, when I'm also making a phone call, when I'm also replying to emails, when I'm just stressed out, it's the same as if I was eating when I was running away from a tiger.
So we don't. So we're not getting the satiation from it. We're not feeling satisfied. We're not full. We're not.
It's not being digested properly. So it will store more.
And then how do we feel then? Does that make us bloated, more sluggish? Then we're looking for comfort because we feel...
Yeah, so if the digestion process isn't happening properly, it can cause us to feel bloated. It can give us heartburn. It can give us just that feeling of like, oh, it's kind of stuck there. It hasn't really moved. So all of those things. It can also, because in a life or death situation, we're not meant to be running from a tiger and say, I've just got to stop for a snack, right? We're not meant to feel hungry in that moment. So it also isn't really being recognised that I've eaten. So my brain is kind of not interested that I've eaten in that moment because it thinks I'm in danger. So if I am eating when I am stressed, I'm more likely to put on weight, I'm less likely to digest it, I'm more likely to have digestive issues, and I'm less likely to recognise that I'm full. If I eat when I am calm and rested, I'm more likely to digest it properly. So even things like you produce more saliva, so digestion straight from the mouth all the way down. I'm more likely to digest it healthily. I'm more likely to also recognise, do you know what, I'm full. Because I am present with it.
And that's the key bit, isn't it? It's the for me, I think, like, as a company, it's we don't know when to stop. I hear lots of conversations about people that struggle to find time to eat, particularly people in work. I know there's a large part of people throughout Grow that are still working from home. They feel tied to their computers. Obviously, we've got people who are retired and people that have children, and it gets busy. But they feel like that they have to work through lunch, that they can't have time, so they're eating on the go, they're eating in the car, and they get really stressed. How would you help them with that? What would you be saying as a therapist? Well, okay, this is what you need to be doing.
You're responsible for you, and you need to set boundaries, is what I would be saying.
My favourite.
So we kind of, again, when we are prioritising everyone else before ourselves, we put ourselves in that position. Actually, most of us would never expect someone else to work and not eat.
Yeah.
We're doing that to ourselves. And so being a little bit regimented of every day, 12:30 to 1 is my lunch. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to make sure I step away from my desk or I'm sat down. Ideally, not eating on the go at all, not eating when we're moving. So when we were talking about the brain earlier, our brain goes into rest and digest much easier when we're sitting down because our ancestors generally only sat down when they were either eating or getting ready to sleep. So, in theory, if I'm sat down and I'm present with that food and I'm eating mindfully and I'm pausing and I'm taking a breath and I'm engaging with that, then that's me eating mindfully, but that's my boundary. And it doesn't have to be the full hour if you struggle to do that, but it does require a bit of discipline.
Because I worked, I think for me, because I've experienced this personally, a lot of people won't know this, but I used to work selling mobile phones. I run a restaurant and obviously Grow. And in all three jobs, sitting down and actually regular breaks was difficult because in a mobile phone world, and this is going back 2008, we were selling. So it was the more time you spent off the shop floor, the more that you weren't going to hit your targets and you had to hit your targets. So it would literally be, you'd be sat at the back of the shop. I was going to say salad. I was going to so good a lie with the Greggs. And it would literally be grab it. Somebody would walk in, you would drop it, you'd go and work. And so I don't think I ever took a proper break in the whole 8 years I worked for them.
Yeah.
When I moved into the restaurant, you'd think, being around a restaurant, that it would be easy. But of course, the demands of the job that I allowed in my boundaries not to happen. And you become the last person to have break. And then you think, oh, well, what's the point? I'm going home. I'll just eat a pack of biscuits, bar of chocolate, bag of crisps. I'll just have something on the way home. But how does somebody put boundaries in? I think that's the key bit, really. I get that. And I love boundaries because I've had to do it with Grow.
Yeah.
Grow became, we talked about this not so long ago.
Yeah.
I do love what I do, everyone. Sorry, when I talk about this. But there was a point back 3 months ago that it was 4:30 in the morning and I was replying to an email from somebody at 4:30 in the morning because the email came through at 4:30 in the morning. And I just woke up, I looked at my phone, the most dangerous things in the world, and started work at 4:30 in the morning. And I was like, this is nuts. Like the CEO of Apple isn't doing that. He's not in the arena, is he? He's sat in the house doing what he wants. He don't care what someone's replying. But I'm like, gotta reply. And I was like, this isn't normal. This needing to be on tap 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I had to set boundaries in.
Yeah.
But it was quite uncomfortable at first.
And that's the key to it. Boundaries are uncomfortable. If we've set ourselves up to people please and do what we think other people are expecting of us, self-imposed usually, then it's very uncomfortable to then say, no, I'm not replying to emails till 9 a.m. or I'm not going to work through lunch. I'm going to take my break. It is uncomfortable, but growth happens in discomfort, right? Growth doesn't happen in comfort. Sorry, it's another one.
Come in to a book soon.
So we need to be uncomfortable to take responsibility and make that change. If we go and do what we've always done, we know the predictability of the results. That's on us. So if I am doing what I've done every day and then expecting change,
It's insanity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What was the quote? I can't think.
It's Einstein, isn't
Einstein.
it? Yeah.
To keep repeating the same things and expect a different outcome.
That's it. Exactly. So it's on me to do that. So I have to, boundaries are basically how we communicate to other people how we want to be treated. We have this kind of idea that everyone abides by the golden rule. You know, people treat you the way they want to be treated. But that isn't the case. And even if it is the case, some people are happy to be treated in a way that I don't want to be treated. So actually, the golden rule isn't a great way of trying to run my life, expecting that you will know what I want. It's much easier if I communicate to you what I want. So if you say to me, Lianne, can I book an appointment with you at this time? And I say, actually, Kieran, I really need a lunch break and I'm back to back. Then that's not me being mean or harsh. That's me saying this is my boundary.
And it's hard, isn't it, to do it initially, but I find it much easier now that those boundaries are in. And I think boundaries are not just around food. And I think, because we could talk a whole session about boundaries. I put boundaries in with friends.
Yep.
With family.
Phone.
Mobile phones.
Yep.
Not quite with Starbucks yet.
No.
Much to your disappointment. But I think boundaries allow you to be much happier.
Yes.
And when you're happier, other things, and when we talk about emotional eating, happy, it makes other things easier, doesn't it?
And you asked me a while ago about how do we start to be sort of kinder to ourselves.
Yeah.
We know we should be kind. Setting boundaries for yourself is one of the kindest things you can do. That's saying I matter. So I don't want to reply to a message. For me, actually, a work message, I don't reply after 6 p.m. That's it. That's just the rule. And when you do that consistently, no one expects a reply at 4:30 in the morning. So it's about me learning that I matter and treating myself with care and consideration, which is huge when we're looking at body confidence, body image, and eating healthily. Because if I matter, then I need to treat myself with care and respect in all areas of my life.
Oh, I love that one. I kind of felt like there was lots of ow. There was lots
I'm
of
trying to
those.
speak louder for that lady as well.
Oh, Margaret Goodwin, she's lush. You okay, Margaret? Yeah, she's fine. She nodded. I think, like, one of the things in this, so you've just brought it up beautifully. I feel like we've talked a lot about emotional eating isn't just one thing, is it?
No.
There's so many stages of it. So, like, when we label this event as Welcome to Emotional Eating with Grow, it's actually, we led you in under false pretenses, because I knew that there wasn't going to be, here's a magical pill tonight, a silver bullet, let's take this away and you're all going to be fixed tonight. If I could, we would. But actually, that's on you. That's on you taking the little bits that you're thinking, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about myself.
Yeah.
That actually, it's not my fault, but I can be responsible for that.
Yeah.
But you've just brought up guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're hard.
Really tough.
How do we start forgiveness for ourselves?
Okay, so first of all, we need to understand shame particularly. So shame is, in its very nature, something we hide. So we don't even tell people that we feel ashamed of ourselves because we're ashamed to admit that we carry shame.
Yeah.
So it's like this never-ending spiral of shame. So shame is something that by the time we've left full-time education, 85% of us have been made to feel so ashamed of ourselves, unless we deal with it, we will carry it for the rest of our life. Just like 85% of us. Now, shame is interesting. The leading expert on shame is someone called Dr. Brené Brown. And she noticed that even though we can carry shame for very similar reasons, the top shame trigger for women and the top shame trigger for men is actually different.
Okay.
So what do you think is the top shame trigger for women? Yeah, body image.
Can I ask this? What do you think it is for the gay man? And that's where a lot of you won't know this. So mine started at the age of, sorry, ma'am, So I know she's sure. Mine started at 12 when, I won't mention his name. I had a friend in school, his name was Gareth, openly gay, and I knew I was a little bit on the camp side, do you know what I mean? But at 12, 13, 14, you don't know. You're learning, you're finding yourself, there's lots going on, isn't it? But, you know, you think 1996, it's a very different world.
Very different.
What a long time ago to where we are right now. And it was deputy head of the school that I was in, rang my father and said, you don't want your son bothering with him because you don't want your son to be gay.
Wow.
And then your father coming back to you going, why are you bothering with why do you bother with that bent bastard? Because you don't want to be like him. So that's where mine started, you know. I'm okay with that. That's not Dad's fault, by the way, and done a lot of work around that. But that was how he was conditioned.
Yep.
You know, so I get it, but like for women, it's hard. It is image, and it is. But what is it like? What does it come out for men?
So for men, it comes out as appearing mentally and/or physically weak. Top shame trigger.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that we can't step into the other camp, but it's interesting. It's interesting that the research hits that. Now, if I look at my own experience and females that I know and have worked with, I actually don't know, and it's interesting if you just ask yourself this in the room, I don't know a woman that by the age of 16, when she leaves school, or 18, hasn't had someone comment on her body, say that she was a bit fat, say that she was skinny, say she was overdeveloped, underdeveloped, boobs were too big, she had body hair or whatever. I don't know a female that hasn't had that done in school. So instantly, the message then and this is stereotype, right? But instantly, the message then for females who receive that is the way I look is more important than anything else. And we carry that. And if we don't face it, because shame, literally the word shame means to cover, if we keep hiding it, we mask it with other things, sometimes emotional eating, right? So we cover it. Equally, I work with an awful lot of men, and I don't know a man who, when he leaves school, hasn't been told, toughen up, man up, don't be a wuss, don't be a sissy, get on with it, don't be gay, walk it off. That kind of message. And so again, how powerful is that as we're growing up to say, okay, being a man means I've got to fit into this. And what it often then manifests into is that shame manifests into something physical. So we overeat, we emotionally eat, we deny ourselves food, we undereat, we overfixate. You know, if we kind of look at the world that we're living in right now, where plastic surgery is just do it, right? So we overfixate on how we look to deal with the outer shell rather than dealing on the shame that's on the inside. So shame is absolutely described professionally as the most toxic emotion we can feel, but it's actually the one that we most commonly feel.
So how do we start to change that then?
So the antidote to shame is to be compassionate to ourselves. So kind of the message that I'm giving all the way through this is to say it's okay, right? To say that you didn't deserve to be spoken to like that. And actually you're no less of a person by your choices. If I'm overweight, if I'm underweight, if whatever someone else has commented on my appearance, that's actually about them, not about me. So to be compassionate to myself. Then to treat myself with the same empathy as if you said to me, someone has said this thing to me and it's really affected me and I feel ashamed, I would be so kind and empathetic to you, which I'm sure most people in this room would be, but we don't often give ourselves that empathy. So compassion, empathy, and then the third antidote to shame is to speak it. Brené Brown says shame cannot survive being spoken. So to actually say to someone, do you know what, I carry shame about how I look. The more you say that and shine a light on it, the less shame can grow.
Instead of hiding it further and further and further down.
Because then I think of shame as like a fungus. If it's in the dark, it'll grow and fester. If we shine a light on it, we can actually clean it out.
Oof. So what about guilt then?
So guilt is almost like a friend of shame. But guilt isn't quite as toxic in its essence. So guilt gives us a moment of worth in that guilt it usually appears when we haven't adhered to our morals or values.
So can I give this one? So
Yeah.
our plan says that we must stay within 500 calories a day on certain groups of foods. And then somebody that uses 501 calories instantly goes, that's it, I've ruined it, I'm guilty.
Yeah.
How do we stop that?
So guilt is about recognizing that I've done something that doesn't meet my morals and values. So we feel that guilt. So the moment of worth in guilt is it sometimes gives us the opportunity to take corrective action, right? So if it had been your birthday and I had forgotten about it, and then I remember, I feel guilty, so then I can reach out to you and say, I'm so sorry I forgot about your birthday. So it gives me that little window of opportunity to take corrective action. But the window of opportunity with guilt is really short.
Yeah.
So if I think, I forgot Kieran's birthday, oh no, I don't want to tell him, I don't want to acknowledge that, every time I see you, I'm feeling that guilt. And if we don't deal with guilt, guilt turns into shame. And that's when it's toxic. So guilt on its own is giving me an opportunity to take corrective action.
So to flip this back to the plan.
Yeah.
So it didn't go the way that I wanted it today. So tomorrow I'm going to make steps to make sure that tomorrow's okay.
Yeah. And the way we do that the most effectively is we make it the priority tomorrow. So if I have said that today I am going to eat really healthy and then I had that chocolate biscuit, then tomorrow it's like, right, tomorrow I am absolutely going to have a really good breakfast because I'm going to set myself up well. The guilt has given me a window of opportunity to adhere to the values I want.
But if we don't do that, and
then it turns into shame.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So then we just feel guilty. So that's when, I mentioned emotional eating can often be secretive.
Yeah.
That will absolutely fester into shame because I'm covering it. Anytime we're covering and hiding, we're walking towards shame.
Okay. And then so why do people do, like one bad day ruins their whole week and then they wait a whole 6 days, 7 days until they start again?
Yeah.
Instead of taking that little bit of guilt, that corrective action to go back into it.
In terms of habits, messing up something once has no measurable effect on any performance, whether that's exercise, whether it's food, whatever habit you want to create. If you mess it up once, it won't have a measurable impact. What is crucial is we don't do 2 in a row because that becomes the new behavior. So say I've decided that I want to exercise and I'm going to go for a walk every morning. And then I wake up one morning, I don't feel great, the weather's awful, and I don't do it. That won't affect my performance as long as the next day I go for that walk.
See, Jan, I told you it wouldn't affect our marathon training if I took one morning off.
So 2 fails, if you like, become the new behavior. 1 fail doesn't matter. So be compassionate, be kind. Go, do you know what? I haven't done as well today as I wanted to. Tomorrow I'm going to be on it. Rather than write it all off.
Did you like that one? I thought we'd go with a good one first. There's lots of questions. So what's the quick break of a cycle of emotional eating? How do I break that cycle? I think this was one that Fran Joplin sent me. How do you break that cycle?
So recognize it. First thing, right? Admit that I emotionally eat. Then start to tune into recognizing, am I physically hungry? Am I emotionally eating? So it's about just seeing these behaviors. Remember, there's not doing it with judgment. I'm a bad person, I'm weak, all of that stuff. Hopefully we put all of that aside by now. It's about going, do you know what? I have a tendency when I'm bored, when I'm lonely, when I'm sad to reach for this food. I'm going to recognize that. I'm going to hold myself accountable to the fact that this is something I do. Then 10-step mindful eating plan. So like checking in, am I really hungry? Really small portions. Don't deny yourself stuff. Like if you have been using chocolate as a crutch for years, to all of a sudden just go, I'm not going to eat it.
How long do you do it for? A week?
What do you mean?
Like if you abstain from it, most people would end up going back.
You'll
and
do it
relapsing,
until
wouldn't they?
your willpower is flashing on red. Could be an hour, could be 2 months. But if you're just doing that based on willpower, your brain always wants you to go back to the comfortable, familiar. Doesn't matter if I hope that message is really coming through. Doesn't matter if you're miserable. So you could do really well and not eat chocolate for 3 months. And then you get some bad news. Your brain is going to say, we can change our mood here right now. Get the chocolate. So it's recognizing that. And I'm a big proponent of don't deny yourself stuff, because as soon as we do that, our inner child is like, I want to eat it.
Oh, you can say it. Go on.
No, it's naughty. I've already said bollocks.
Oh, well.
So what we don't want is almost creating a war within ourselves, right? Which I think lots of us do, particularly with food. So recognizing I'm craving chocolate. This is what I do when I'm hormonal. I mean, I think there's a question in a bit about hormones.
Oh, absolutely.
But this is what I do when I'm hormonal, when I'm sad, when I'm lonely. Okay, then I'm going to mindfully eat either a smaller bar, or if you're disciplined enough, one piece of chocolate. I'm going to mindfully and presently do that.
And that is true though, isn't it? Because imagine it now. It's a hot summer's day. A nice ice cream with a flake. Like most people go, can't have it because I'm on a diet, can't have it. But actually, there's nothing wrong with an ice cream.
Think of the emotional connection to what you just created.
Oh, I know. I'm in Seaside Town, jelly sandals on.
Exactly. And loads of people in the room.
But that's what I was just by Barry Island Beach.
Yeah.
I can remember it once. I had a tray of chips and they fell on the floor. I was devastated. It's never been the same again. But everybody came with me though, didn't they? You could see
and everyone
I
had their own
screamed.
emotional connection.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, you know, we holidays, being taken as a treat, all of that stuff. So recognizing that that's okay, but actually it's just a story. It isn't a fact. You know, we talk a lot about that in therapy. But it isn't a fact that if I eat that ice cream, then I go back to feeling like I did when I was 8 and I was playing at the beach. That isn't going to happen. It's always going to be a bit of an anticlimax with that. So what am I trying to create? What is it that I'm really looking for? If I want the ice cream, absolutely fine, but I'm going to eat it mindfully and be present with it. I'm going to notice how my body feels. I'm going to notice when I'm feeling full. I'm going to be calm when I eat it. I'm going to be with it, right? So you have that ice cream and make love to it, right? You be present with it. Not literally, but I just remembered who I'm talking to.
I'm not a sex pest, the way you said that there. Cullen wishes. I'd rather have a cup of tea to cutch.
But don't have that ice cream in the hope that this is going to give me that feeling.
And that's the key bit, isn't it, to the emotion?
Yeah.
It's the key bit. It's the food isn't going to give you the feeling. And that's the bit to stop that. And I love the whole eating mindfully thing. I think it is about being fully aware of it.
Yeah.
And then deciding, am I trying to get this to have an emotional reaction? Or do I actually really just want it? And they're two very different things, are they?
Really different.
Okay, so you brought up the menopause. I think it's a really current conversation. I think it's got louder, definitely in the last 18 months. There's lots more conversations around perimenopause and the menopause itself. So why does that affect the way that a lady would eat?
Okay, so it's important, first of all, we recognise the difference between a woman's hormones and a man's hormones, right? So men basically run on a 24-hour cycle. So you have pretty much every 15 minutes a rise and fall in testosterone. So as long as a man is generally fit, well, has slept, the way he feels today will be very similar to the way he feels next week, right? Women have testosterone and that 24-hour cycle, but they also have other hormones running through them, particularly estrogen and progesterone, which run on a 28-day cycle as an average, right? So generally what happens in a menstruating woman is that for the first 2 weeks of the month, we have a real rise in estrogen. That makes us feel energetic. It makes us feel good about ourselves. It makes us feel a bit more confident. Roughly day 14, we ovulate. That's when we feel super confident and sexy. Basically because nature's trying to make us get pregnant, right? And then after day 14, the estrogen starts to decline. We then get a spike in something called progesterone, which is the hormone that's produced in readiness for us to be pregnant, right? So it's like your womb gets excited that there's going to be a baby every month. So we have that. What that tends to do is it causes a lot of bodily changes. One of the things is it tends to make us hungrier, okay? So we start to potentially have emotional eating cravings.
Okay.
And potentially will feel a bit hungrier. As progesterone and estrogen then start to decrease, they start to kind of crash, basically. In the last week of the month, we tend to feel more emotional, more sensitive, more anxious, our sleep is disrupted, all of these different side effects. And what often happens is we tend to turn to food. So in the period of menstruation, we need roughly about 200 calories more a day.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so basically our body is using more energy, so we need about 200 more calories. So not a lot, but actually I myself, and know pretty much every woman, have had times at that time of the month where they're like, I'm ravenous. I could eat anything, you know? A manky horse, right? So that's when we menstruate. Okay, so all females on a cycle, whether it's 28 days, 35 days, doesn't really matter, you will have your own cycle of that rise and fall of hormones. Therefore, you are more prone to go to fat-heavy foods, sugar-heavy foods, and want to eat more as your hormones have completely depleted. If we're perimenopausal, perimenopause is basically reverse puberty. Right? What happens is our hormones start spiking and crashing all over the place. You're very lucky you don't have to go through that.
I know more about it now than I ever thought I would.
Good, I'm glad.
It's
And I
fascinating.
think actually all men should know about it because whether it's a mother, a sister, a partner, like we're all impacted by it. So what perimenopause does is over roughly about a 10-year period, starts the crash and decline of estrogen and progesterone. So we just produce less and less of it as we start to go through what was traditionally known as the menopause period, right? As that is declining, originally what happens, so for the first few years for sure, it fluctuates quite rapidly. So sometimes we will be crashing and have no estrogen, feel really low, feel moody, feel sensitive, sleep disruptions.
Emotional food.
Emotional eating to try and then mitigate how rubbish we feel.
Shit, you can say.
Yeah. But because we're in a fluctuation period, tomorrow you might actually feel really good. So with your normal menstruation, you can track it and go, do you know what? Like day 21 to 27, I'm feeling rubbish. That's when I need to be kind to myself. When we go through perimenopause, it's a lot harder to track it. So it could change day by day. So it's not like, oh, my estrogen's starting to decrease. I now have a couple of weeks of that. I could have a little spike of it tomorrow and feel better. That makes it harder in terms of food because our energy crashes, we struggle to concentrate, we've not slept as well, we feel more anxious, more emotional, more sensitive. What would most of us do?
Straight in, isn't it?
So we're straight into that self-medicating with food. Now, there are plenty of foods that support that process. There is nothing, as far as I'm aware, in terms of food that will stop that process, unfortunately.
Sorry.
So there's foods like sunflower seeds, sweet potatoes. They're very good for helping us kind of get a more regulated level of estrogen, but we are still going to go through that. Once we're menopausal, so that's medically described as 1 year of not having a period. Once we're menopausal, what happens is we level off. And the great news about that is that then we're not having any fluctuations. We're in a little bit more of a situation like men. There's loads of different things that come with it, but in terms of food, we are much more regulated in our mood and our feelings, much more likely to be able to create healthier eating habits and not feel the need to self-medicate with food.
So the perimenopause is the most difficult phase.
Yeah, sorry. But I'm with you.
I'm not, but I can support it. No, but we see it, and we see that people that when they hit perimenopause, their weight losses are slower because obviously they're taking in more foods.
Yeah.
And instead of taking in those lovely, right, good foods,
Yep.
we're going emotional eating.
Yes, there also is a real change. So generally, and I'm talking very general, in a healthy woman with healthy cycles, generally we have subcutaneous fat, right? Which is the fat that responds really well to cutting calories, exercising. When we start going through the menopause, we actually start to increase in what's called visceral fat.
Yeah.
Which is way more stubborn, way more difficult. And most women who are going through menopause will notice at the very least their waist starts to thicken.
Yeah.
So we start to get more belly fat. So then what worked when I was 35 is now not working at 55, right? And then we, again, self-blame, self-judge, shame, all of that stuff. So there is real scope for, if we're in that window as females, educating ourselves about how do I need to do things, because the way you lost weight in your 30s is going to be completely different in your 50s.
Of course it is. And even for men, and I'm not comparing the menopause and things like that, but like even for me, what worked for me 15 years ago to lose 10 stone wouldn't work for me now.
Yeah.
Because I'm now 15 years older.
Yeah.
My metabolic rate is much slower now. I'm old.
And men's testosterone levels do decline. They just don't have that extreme, sharp decline generally that females have.
Let's take a question from the room.
Okay.
Who's got a good one?
Fantastic.
So Lianne has just asked a question which is around about when you're younger, you're able to go out and do all of these things and have a social life. Mm-hmm. But as you get older, that changes. You still want to go out and do all these things, and the journey becomes harder. And when you're in those moments, in a nice restaurant or a nice pub, and how do you stop yourself emotionally eating? How do we stop going, oh, well, if everyone else is having this, I'm going to have it as well?
Yeah.
Because it feels a bit like peer pressure, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So where would somebody start there?
So the first thing is to recognise, I think, the way that we entertain ourselves changes as we get older. So I think Lianne was talking about, I used to dance and be able to drink and be up all night.
I bet she could dance as
well.
So
exactly. And then as we get older, it's much more likely we'll sit around in a coffee shop, go to a restaurant. So it's much more sedentary.
Yeah.
Also, times are changing, right? So you mentioned being alive in the 1990s, which is ridiculous. So long ago.
I know.
But in the 1990s, the way we ate was very different, right? So yes, we could get takeaways, but I think they were pretty much you had to go and pick them up.
And now it's an app.
And now it's an app. So now we can lay on our sofa, we can do that, the food gets delivered, and we argue about who's going to answer the door because we don't even want to do that bit, right?
Yes, Cullen, J. Winston, Nichols.
So the way we eat is different. We are not hunter-gatherers anymore. We still have the makeup of that. So the body and the brain hasn't caught up with the world we've created.
Yeah.
The way we entertain has also changed. So if we went back to the 1990s, there were very few coffee shops. Like it wasn't like
I knew we'd come back to coffee.
Well, it wasn't a social thing like it is now. It's something that all of us just, we'll pop to Starbucks or wherever. And it's become a social thing. So the way we entertain now is much more sedentary as well. According to the World Health Organization, the biggest threat to human health is being sedentary. So,
it is second to smoking, isn't it?
Yeah. The average person spends about 70% of their day still. And so...
that's got ripples then. Could you feel it? It was
it's huge. So if we think about our day, we have made ourselves ridiculously comfortable. So we sit at a desk, we sit in a comfy car, we sit in a comfy coffee shop. So even people who perhaps go to the gym an hour every day and they really work hard for that hour, if they then spend 23 hours at their desk, on their sofa, in their bed, they are still likely to be putting their health at risk. So what we need to do, and the kind of advice I would share, is to work on stopping being sedentary so much. So literally set a timer in your phone, every hour get up and have a little walk around. What we want to do is we want the body to start to get used to a little bit of movement. On the back of that, if you really want to do it, so many of us have been told that how many steps should we walk? Bollocks. So there is no research behind that at all. 10,000 steps came from a Japanese inventor who created one of the first popular pedometers. And what they called it translated into 10,000 steps. It just became universally accepted. Now, if you walk 10,000 steps every day, it's really good for you. So I'm not going to say not to, but there is no science that backs up that being a good number for you to do. There is, however, science that says if you walk a certain number of steps, you are 88% less likely to feel anxious, depressed, and more likely to have purpose. So what do we think that step number is? 8,000, 6,000? 5,000? It is 5,649 steps. 5,649 steps. So if you're doing less than 1,000 steps right now, try and build it up slowly. I am absolutely not saying, but 5,649 steps is a lot more achievable than 10,000. And we know in terms of the research that that improves our mental health. So my biggest advice is accept that our world has changed and the world is encouraging us to be more sedentary. Refuse to do it. Choose to move as frequently as you can.
So just to dig further into this then, I think part of this is, so when you're in those situations with friends, am I right in saying that, Lianne? So you're in a restaurant, so you're in that situation and you really want to be healthy. That was your intention, your focus for the day. But you feel that there's this peer pressure behind that.
Yeah.
How would you make sure that you stick to what you want to do and not be into old habits, into the guilt and shame?
Yeah. So emotional eating comes into that in terms of, am I trying to eat my emotion? Am I ordering this because I'm hungry? Am I ordering this because of an emotion, even if that's peer pressure? But also recognizing that misery loves company, right? So you will all have people in your life that are used to you being the overweight one, the person who eats the most. And so you
make... the good time girl.
Yeah, the good time girl. And you make them feel better about themselves. And so unfortunately, you will have people who will go, well, go on, it's only a piece of cake. Go on, have it. They're doing that for their agenda to make themselves feel better. I'm responsible for me. I control me. That's their issue. I'm responsible for me.
Does that help a bit? It's fascinating, and it is fascinating. And the bit about sedentary is, Ash and I have talked this many a time about, so I'm bringing her down with me on Starbucks on this one. You know what I'm going to say though, don't you? Yeah. That we drive to Starbucks and sit in a car. We've never once gone out and gone on the long walk around the building. We sit in a car.
Yep.
But it is naturally because it's so comfortable, it's easy, it's raining. We live in Wales, it rains all the time, don't it?
Yeah.
But it is so easy to be comfortable sat in a car.
Yeah.
Everything has changed.
Yeah.
Like, I can remember if we wanted a takeaway, it was a walk to go and get it.
Yeah.
And it's not now, is it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we would have one, I've mentioned earlier with Peter, like once a year. We got to a point, Cal and I did at the end of last year, his fault. No, I take my responsibility in that. I ordered him. He just came along for the journey. But we were having 3 or 4 a week.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. When we talk about my responsibility, and that I matter, that had to change in January.
Yeah.
And we've gone from having 3 weeks to none. And not only is that, of course, contributed to me feeling better, feeling happier, feeling fitter, feeling all of that stuff, I got more money in the bank.
Exactly. And imagine how much you'll have when you quit Starbucks.
Who's next time when we do this?
Just so people know, how many free Starbucks drinks have you got, Kieran?
No. Okay, so let's grab a question from this side. Who's got a question? Oh, Amy Williams.
I just want to provide some background to my question. So this is something I've really struggled with. And I reached out for help, and it was called binge eating.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever referred to what I was doing, which is everything that you've said tonight, as emotional eating.
Yep.
And when I was working through my problems, I was always asked, well, think about how you feel when you're doing what you're doing. And I never attributed sadness, happiness, nothing. It was just something I did, and I could never stop myself eating. So I suppose I was wondering what the difference is between emotional eating and what binge eating is.
Yeah.
Because I always felt binging was bad and it was shameful.
Yeah.
So I never really, talked about emotional eating. So I wonder what that difference is.
Okay, amazing, first of all, that you're sharing it and sharing it in the room. Yeah, it's brilliant. So hopefully getting rid of the shame, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Starting to bring light to it.
now.
Amazing. So it's a very blurry line, is the honest answer, because it's very unlikely someone would be a binge eater and not be using food as an emotional crutch. So it's still a coping mechanism. Now, there's loads of different reasons, and absolutely in this environment, not going to go into yours at all, but there's loads of different reasons that we will do that. But it ultimately will create a lot of the same things we've talked about in terms of emotional eating, the shame, the judgment, the guilt, all of that stuff, the secrecy. So it is a very difficult thing. We could work it out working one-to-one, but it's a very difficult thing to say, this is binge eating, this is emotional eating, because they are so interconnected.
Yeah, and I think that's what prompted me to ask the question. Because
Yeah.
everything we talked about this evening is exactly what I was doing.
Yep.
But like the professionals I saw was like binge eating disorder. I
Yeah.
never said that I had a disorder,
Yep.
but that's what I was painted as.
Yeah.
But again,
I
I
think-
see absolutely that stress, but I never really attributed it. So I think that binge title made it seem that I was gluttonous.
Yeah.
When it was.
It's a lot of guilt and shame with it.
I felt.
Yeah.
But then those professional people were saying to me, it's binging.
Yeah.
How-
So it's
Yeah.
just in my mind.
But how does that happen, though, that we just get labelled by professionals? And
But it
I'm
happens
not.
all the time, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And it's really dangerous. And that's why when I do things like this in this arena, I'm always happy to answer questions, but I'm always very mindful of trying to answer a question in a broad term, because I would hate someone to pick something out and go, oh, that's my label now.
Yeah.
And I do think there is a risk of labelling, because in this example, that label created actually further shame. So that's not how I work as a therapist. It absolutely is how the kind of medical system is set out, because the medical system needs labels in order to kind of funnel you, right, and work out the appropriate treatment. Labelling someone can sometimes create a lack of power. So we feel like we're powerless because we have the label.
Yeah.
So even the term disorder can make us feel like, well, this is something fundamentally wrong with me. Labelling someone can cause them to feel shame, embarrassment, judgment, and it can be counterproductive. If we need medical treatment, we need the label in order to follow the flowchart to get the appropriate treatment. So this is a really difficult thing to talk about in generalist terms. What I would say is that one of the fine lines of difference is what they term as binge eating, and it's definitely a term I avoid as well, if you notice I haven't said it. What they term as binge eating will always be emotional eating, but we can emotionally eat without binging. Do you see?
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult one to have in a broad spectrum, because I do not want anyone to take anything from this session that makes them feel less than. What I want this session to do is empower people to recognise you're okay, you're just human. And there are other options, and there are tools, and there are strategies. So even if something hasn't worked to this point, there are things we can do. So I don't want someone to listen to this and take a label or take a definition.
Can I ask you a question? Don't feel like you have to answer, okay? Do you feel relieved a bit about what we've talked about tonight from when you came in?
If you'd asked me that back in October last year, I wouldn't come to this. Like secret eating, I would drive home from work and I would I've got nothing sweet in the house, I must stop off, and I'd spend £20 in the shop, and then I'd hide it in.
Yep.
But I think now I'm totally open. I'll tell anyone, because you notice it in other people.
Yes.
You notice other patterns in other people. But I think talking about it helps, and I think it's better to label it with a label.
Yep.
To call it emotional eating, because I wouldn't have felt as much shame
As the disorder would?
Yeah, because I remember told you, didn't I? And I was like, I think I've got this binge eating disorder. And I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed of myself. And I was going, well, why can't we talk about the willpower?
Yeah.
Why can't I just lose weight? Why can't I just eat well when I'd done it before? And it's that backwards thing we're talking about Slimming World. But this is, again, I'm in a totally different place now. So this was great to come to tonight, because I was going, I totally get what Lianne is saying. But totally different vibe now. Again, if I'd come to this a while ago, I'd probably be crying now outside. But
I did all that for us earlier. But I think, and I'm conscious, just one last question, okay? And I'm going to do this from somebody that I spoke to earlier on. I won't mention the name. Why, when I've done so well, I've achieved my goals, I've got to where I've wanted to be, and I've loved it, and I'm feeling phenomenal, do I then go backwards and self-sabotage?
Yeah, self-sabotage. I mean, we have covered this, really.
Yeah.
Why do we self-sabotage? We self-sabotage because the brain wants familiar comfort. That's why we self-sabotage. There is so much pressure, and again, this is me speaking generally. If you have a goal of I must lose X amount, what happens when I get there? We touched on earlier the why, the motivator, right? That isn't the goal. Really, the goal should be I am going to start eating healthier, making better choices for me because I want to feel better. As a byproduct, I'll lose weight. But this is a life-changing decision. So I'm really kind of aware that when we set a goal, like I mentioned, lose weight to go to my daughter's wedding. Well, my daughter's married now. Start going back to it. The brain is pulling you back into familiar comfort. When we set a goal that is, I am now a healthy eater. I am now someone who looks after myself. I'm now someone who respects my body, who cares for myself. When we make that, that's a lifelong change. It is not attached to a number, a dress size, anyone else's opinion or judgment. This is about me being healthy.
I love it. That's such a brilliant answer. So, thank you. Thank you so much for tonight. And I have so many more questions, and we shall meet again. Come in for a round of applause for Lianne, everyone. Next! I'm dying to do that all night. I'd love to do another one of these again. I just think they're so brilliant. Have you all had something from it? And I really hope that it gives you a little bit of insight into a bit more about the stuff that we've talked about, that I've experienced, stuff that I've read, you've read, on that emotional eating is huge, but it's not your fault. But you can be responsible.
Yes, absolutely.
And I hope it has and we've talked about it quite broadly, as you said.
Yeah.
But it's about you picking the bits that can help you make a change and move that on and move a little bit further forward, because you can. Do you want to add anything in?
Just to say, just focus on one bit that has resonated with you throughout the session. So whatever it was, if there's one bit, just take that bit away and build on that bit. Don't think you've got to consume it all. I know you're recording it, obviously, so that people can go back and dip in and out and hopefully get some other bits from it. The resources, they're totally free. There's lots on the website which will reinforce what we've covered. So I really recommend that you go and you just download. There's even a body confidence meditation on there, so you can fall asleep listening to my voice to make you feel more confident. There's loads of resources on there. There's also books and all sorts on there. But just work on one thing, right? What I work on with all of my clients is compound gains, right? So compound interest is very little to begin with, but eventually over time it really starts to add up. Work on compound gains. So tiny little changes now, but you're consistent. We miss one day, we never miss 2 days, and we build them up.
I love that. Like, one day's all right, but 2 days, new habit. And,
Yeah.
thank you so much.